Part 1. The Scent of Sin and Hairspray. The air hung heavy, a sickly sweet blend, cheap perfume, liberally splashed on flushed skin, and a cloud of hairspray that, I suspected, hung over the graduating class like a toxic fog. It was as if every girl in town had conspired to suffocate everyone with their secret seduction scents. And all this inside the Riverdale Hotel's enormous, tasteless ballroom, draped with cheap, glittery streamers and wilting flowers. It was my sister Ashley's prom. Officially, her night of triumph. Unofficially, my personal torture. My parents, Dawn and Caroline, were in their element. They were shining like a Christmas tree, and if I didn't know them better, I might even have believed they were genuinely happy. But I saw the falseness in their strained smiles, in their overly bright eyes. Ashley was their project, their masterpiece. Blonde, blue-eyed, cheerleading captain, and prom queen material all rolled into one. The perfect child they always wanted. They worshipped her, placing her on a pedestal where there was no room for me. And me. I was a side effect, a random glitch in their carefully planned script of the perfect family. With my shaved sides, nose piercing, and love for rancid t-shirts, I was the embodiment of everything they despised. I listened to loud, aggressive music, read books they would never approve of, and asked questions they were uncomfortable hearing. I was too loud, too real, too different. So, as we pulled up to the hotel in their immaculate silver SUV, I already felt guilty. Guilty for existing. Guilty for not meeting their expectations. Guilty for overshadowing Ashley's perfect evening with my presence. As soon as I got out of the car, I felt that piercing gaze they had perfected over the years. Dawn took a deep, long-suffering breath, as if I were carrying some contagious disease. Caroline forced that signature, fake sweet smile onto her face, the one that made me cringe with discomfort. "Don't do anything to ruin Ashley's evening," Caroline hissed, leaning so close I could smell her ridiculously expensive perfume. It wasn't a warning. It was a veiled threat masked as motherly concern. Dawn, as always, was more reserved, but his gaze conveyed the same message. "Be sensible, Raven," he said, his voice cold and distant. He always called me Raven, my full name, when he was displeased. He usually used the affectionate Ray when he wanted something from me. They were so absorbed in posing for photos with Ashley and her boyfriend, Jason, the picture-perfect prom couple, that they barely noticed as I retreated into the shadows, watching the performance like a spectator in a theater of the absurd. Ashley was radiant, exuding confidence and charm. Jason was tall, muscular, and undoubtedly rich. They were the epitome of the American dream, a carefully crafted product of their upbringing. I felt invisible, a ghost at my own family celebration. And, honestly, I wasn't sure if that bothered me. Maybe being invisible was the best option. Less chance of messing things up. Less chance of disappointing them. Less chance of feeling that sharp, aching pain in my chest every time I saw them look at Ashley with such love, with such adoration. That was never meant for me. Part 2. Invisible Presence and Whispers of Intrigue. The feeling of being an outsider clung to me like a persistent melody. I wandered slowly through the ballroom, drowning in the cacophony of laughter, loud pop music, and the rustling of satin dresses. The girls, arm in arm with their dates, spun in slow dances, their faces dissolving into happy, carefree smiles. They seemed to float in their own bubble of joy, completely unaware of my existence. I glided between them like a ghost, transparent and non-existent. I tried to blend into the scenery, to find some kind of foothold in this sea of teenage exuberance. I watched groups of boys slapping each other on the back and exchanging stupid jokes. I saw girls whispering behind the scenes about dresses, hairstyles, and undoubtedly gossip. I envied them. I envied their ease, their connection, their belonging. I wanted to be a part of it, if only for a moment, but I knew it was impossible. My blue mohawk and black dress with spikes didn't exactly fit with the pastel colors and glittering decorations. At one point, I even tried to force myself to be happy for Ashley. After all, it was her night. She deserved all the applause and attention. She had worked so hard to be the perfect daughter, the perfect student, the perfect girlfriend. But even that I couldn't manage. Each time I looked at her, I felt only a mixture of envy and bitterness. Why her and not me? Why did I always have to be in the shadows? Why could I never deserve their love? Time dragged on slowly, like molasses. By the time dessert was served, a huge multi-layered cake decorated with artificial roses and a layer of sugar frosting, I felt like I was suffocating from boredom and disappointment. I wandered near the drinks table, staring blankly at the sparkling water and fruit punch. And then I saw them. Dawn and Caroline, standing in a corner of the room, holding hands and whispering to each other. They were trying to appear inconspicuous, but their tense postures and worried expressions gave them away completely. Dawn kept adjusting his tie, and Caroline nervously twisted the ring on her finger. Something was wrong. Something they were trying to hide. They had always been masters of concealing their true feelings. Over the years, I'd learned to read between the lines, to recognize the subtle signs of their displeasure and anxiety. But tonight, they looked as if they were about to explode from tension. As if they were holding some terrible secret that was about to break out. Ashley, it seemed, noticed nothing. She was engrossed in cutting her piece of cake, surrounded by friends and admirers. Her face shone with happiness and anticipation. She was in her own world, in a bubble of perfection that my parents had so carefully created for her. Instinct drove me closer. I needed to know what was happening. I needed to understand what they were hiding. I went close enough to hear snippets of their conversation, but far enough away so as not to arouse suspicion. Dawn spoke in a low, tense voice. "We need to deal with this tonight, Caroline. We can't wait any longer." Caroline replied, her voice trembling with tears. "But what if she finds out? What if everything goes wrong?" "She won't find out," Dawn assured her, but there was no confidence in his voice. "We'll take care of it. We have to." I froze, trying to make sense of their words. What did they have to deal with? What did they have to hide? Who was she? And what could go wrong? Curiosity and suspicion overwhelmed me. I always knew there were secrets in our family, but this seemed bigger than just the usual lies and omissions. It smelled of desperation and fear, and I knew I had to know the truth. Part 3. The Proposal and an Overheard Conversation. Gathering my courage, I took another step forward. "Is something wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even and indifferent, as if I simply wanted to know if it was time to leave yet. Dawn instantly turned away from me, as if I were the plague. He always became aloof when he was hiding something. Caroline, on the other hand, fixed me with a look that held some strange, almost pitiful guilt. She looked as if she wanted me to disappear, to vanish, to dissolve into thin air. "No, Raven, nothing," Dawn snapped, his voice curt and impatient. "Just enjoying the evening. Can't you see how happy your sister is?" Caroline nodded hastily, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Ashley is such a smart girl, isn't she? We're so proud of her." She tried to smile, but it only resulted in something resembling a grimace. I felt disgusted. Tired of being invisible, tired of being extraneous, tired of always being put in the same category as furniture. Tired of hearing their fake compliments to Ashley, their constant praise of her virtues. After all, I was their daughter too. Didn't I deserve even a drop of their attention, even a little of their love? Feeling the anger rising inside me, I turned away and headed for the punch table, pretending I wanted to refresh myself. But in reality, I just wanted to get away from them, from their lying smiles and unspoken accusations. It was then that I overheard a snippet of conversation. Dawn, who had moved a little to the side, was talking to Jason, Ashley's boyfriend. I shouldn't have been eavesdropping, but their voices were loud enough to reach me, and their words were too intriguing to ignore. "We won't tell anyone, Jason," Dawn whispered, his voice tense and insistent. "This will stay between us. You understand, right?" I froze, clutching the plastic punch cup so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "We won't tell anyone?" What had they agreed on? What secret were they hiding from Ashley? And why was Dawn so insistent on silence? While I was trying to make sense of what I had heard, something completely unexpected happened. Ashley, radiant with happiness, suddenly ran up to me, grabbed my arm, and dragged me towards the center of the room. "Raven, you won't believe it." "Jason." "Jason proposed to me," she shouted, her voice ringing with delight. I was stunned. A proposal? So quickly? They were only 18 years old. Everyone around froze, hearing her words. Then there was applause, congratulations, and excited shouts. The crowd surrounded Ashley and Jason, congratulating them and wishing them happiness. Dawn and Caroline immediately ran up to Ashley, hugging her and kissing her, as if she had just won the Olympics. They were shining, basking in the glory of their perfect daughter. I stood aside, feeling even more invisible than before. I congratulated Ashley, forcing a fake smile, but inside I was overwhelmed by some strange, inexplicable feeling. It was a mixture of envy, disappointment, and, above all, rage. Rage at Ashley, at my parents, at Jason, at this whole fake, hypocritical world in which I felt completely alien. At that moment, I realized that I had to do something. I couldn't stay silent any longer, couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. I had to speak out everything that was on my mind, even if it destroyed everything around me. A crazy plan formed in my mind. A plan that could destroy my family, but which, I knew, I had to carry out. I could no longer live a lie. Part 4. Breaking the ether and unveiling the truth. My legs, as if not my own, carried me forward. I felt the mounting tension pulsing in my temples, the blood pounding in my ears. I was walking towards the stage where the DJ, a guy with a ridiculous haircut and enormous headphones, was engrossed in working his equipment. He didn't even notice me, so absorbed was he in his role as the creator of the atmosphere at this fake celebration. With each step, my heart was beating faster and faster, as if trying to escape my chest. I knew I was doing something crazy, something that would change my life forever. I knew I might hurt Ashley, destroy her dreams, but I couldn't stop. Something inside me was burning, demanding release, demanding truth. Reaching the stage, I grabbed the microphone, ignoring the surprised look of the DJ. He tried to say something to stop me, but I gestured for him to be quiet. My eyes were fixed on my parents, who had frozen in horror, as if they'd seen a ghost. Dawn's face had paled, and on Caroline's face was panic. I saw Ashley turn to me, her face expressing complete incomprehension. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my trembling hands and my rapid breathing. The microphone felt heavy and awkward, like a burden of guilt. All eyes were on me. The silence in the hall became ringing, as if before an explosion. "I need to say something," I announced, trying to make my voice sound confident, although inside me everything was shaking with fear. The crowd fell silent. The music stopped. Everyone froze, waiting for what I was going to say. Dawn and Caroline stood motionless, as if paralyzed, their faces contorted with terror. I saw Ashley, still smiling happily, frown slightly, as if she didn't understand what was happening. Jason stood next to her, embarrassed and slightly annoyed. I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my strength. This was the moment of truth. The moment when I had to either speak out everything that had accumulated in my soul, or remain forever in the shadows. Opening my eyes, I looked at my parents. "I know something that your parents haven't told you," I said loudly and clearly, so that everyone could hear. I began to tell the story. I told about the conversation I had overheard between Dawn and Caroline, about their tense faces and worried glances. I told about the financial problems they had so carefully hidden from everyone. I told about how Dawn had lost his job a few months ago, and how they had fallen into debt. But most importantly, I told about what I had learned from the conversation between Dawn and Jason. About how my parents were counting on the generosity of Ashley's fiancé, how they had hinted to him about their financial problems, hoping he would offer them help. I told how they were trying to manipulate Jason so that he would give them money to provide them with a decent future. I told everything, without concealing any details, sparing neither myself nor my parents. I spoke of lies, of hypocrisy, of greed. I spoke of how they had sacrificed Ashley's happiness for their own gain. With each phrase, I saw how the faces of my parents were contorted with rage and shame. Ashley looked stunned, as if she had been stabbed in the back. Jason stood, dumbfounded, his eyes widening with disbelief. The crowd, holding their breath, watched the unfolding drama, as if a thrilling film. I knew I was ruining everything. I knew that I was hurting my sister. I knew that my parents would never forgive me for this. But I couldn't stop. I had to tell the truth, however bitter it might be. I had to free myself from this burden that had been weighing on me for years. I had to protect Ashley from manipulation and lies. Having finished my story, I exhaled. Silence fell in the hall, so thick that you could cut it with a knife. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. And what followed was even more unexpected than everything that had happened before. Part 5: Renunciation and Liberation. In the deathly silence that followed my words, time itself seemed to stand still. Every nerve in my body was on edge. I was expecting anything: tears, accusations, denials. But what happened next surpassed all my wildest expectations. Suddenly, as if on command, Dawn and Caroline erupted in a scream. It wasn't just a scream. It was an animalistic howl that had escaped from the very depths of their souls. Their voices were a mixture of rage, shame, and despair. It was the cry of people backed into a corner, people whose carefully constructed illusions had been mercilessly shattered. "How could you?" Dawn roared, his face turning red with anger. His voice trembled, as if the earth was shaking. He took a step towards me, his fists clenched. "You've ruined everything. You've broken our lives." Caroline was gasping with rage, tears streaming down her face. You monster," she gasped, her voice shaking with hatred. "We've done so much for you. And you paid us back with such ingratitude." Then, like a bolt from the blue, came the words that changed everything. The words that destroyed the last hope of reconciliation. The words that forever separated us. "You are no longer our daughter." Caroline screamed, her voice ringing with desperation. "You are no longer a part of our family." The words echoed through the hall, like a funeral knell. I felt them piercing my heart, like sharp shards of glass. But strangely, I felt no pain. I felt relief. Relief that I no longer had to pretend, no longer had to meet their expectations, no longer had to play the role of the obedient daughter. Relief that I no longer had to hide my true self, no longer had to suppress my feelings. In that moment, I understood that their renunciation was not a curse, but a blessing. It was a gift they had given me, without realizing it. They had set me free. They had released me. I looked at them, at their faces contorted with anger, and felt nothing but pity. They were prisoners of their own illusions, victims of their own greed and vanity. Then I turned to Ashley. She stood motionless, like a statue, her face wet with tears. I tried to catch her eye, tried to explain to her that I had done this for her, that I wanted to protect her from lies and manipulation. But she wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on her parents, full of pain and disappointment. I realized that she wouldn't be able to understand me, that she needed time to realize the whole truth. I decided to leave her alone, to give her the opportunity to make her own choice. Without another word, I simply shrugged. I felt neither fear nor regret. I felt only a strange sense of freedom. Freedom from their lies, freedom from their expectations, freedom from having to be who they wanted me to be. I turned and walked away. I don't know what happened next, who said what, who thought what. It no longer mattered to me. I walked out of the Riverdale hotel, breathed in the fresh night air, and smiled. At my sister's prom, my parents renounced me and then screamed when I revealed their secret. And you know what? I was finally able to take a deep breath. I was free. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Maybe there's uncertainty ahead. Maybe I'll face difficulties and trials, but I will no longer live a lie. I will live by my own rules, and that is the most important thing.